Do I have to introduce this game? Come on, who doesn't know what Pokemon is? For the three of you out there who aren't familiar, is this a picture of the rock you've been living under? Or how about this one? Hey, maybe it's this fancy tree stump. Got yourself a nice little bit of tree stump real estate going on. For the three people who genuinely don't know, Pokemon has got to be the biggest RPG franchise of all time, starting with games on the Nintendo Game Boy in the mid-90s. From there was an anime series, a manga series, a whole load of spin-off games, all forming a Goliath of a franchise. But it all started with the original two games, Pokemon Red and Green, released in the West as Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue. Over the past 20 years, we've had 6, soon to be 7 generations of Pokemon games, each adding more of the monsters to raise and battle, alongside mechanical tweaks and gameplay changes. Overall, the quality has generally improved and become much more user-friendly, but as it is with everything of this nature, there's always a fan or two that insists the originals are the best, that following up on them is pointless, that the magic was lost. So I decided to test this theory out. I'm going to replay Pokemon Red, while remaining as faithful as I can to my original experience playing it on Christmas 1998. I was a starry-eyed 6-year-old then, and now I'm a not-so-starry-eyed 24-year-old on YouTube with way too much free time. Regardless. Onward. Nostalgia is a powerful thing. How we frame our memories is important to what we are as beings, and it's a vital role in how our tastes develop as we grow. Without Pokemon, I doubt I'd even have an interest in video games, and this channel will either not exist or be something really obnoxious. I wonder what that would be like. Welcome to Douchebags! Here we are, we're gonna destroy some shit in the store. What is? Okay, now we're good. Hey you, clean it up. Ah, just a prank, bro! Get over here,
Oh my dude, you just got pranked! Bet you didn't see that.
Just a prank! Well, that was horrifying. I suddenly feel a fuckload better about bitching about video games on the internet. The original opening scene to Generation 1 is pretty well known and kind of iconic. You're instructed to go and find Professor Oak, but he's missing, so instead you go to venture forth by yourself. Before you get mauled to death by a Rattata, the good professor saves you, pulls you back into his lab, and sets you and his asshole grandson off on a quest to become a Pokemon Master. This character becomes your rival, picking the starter Pokemon that's strong against yours and generally being a bully throughout. So I gave him an appropriate nickname. Foreshadowing! I decided to start with Bulbasaur, because on my initial virgin playthrough of the game I chose the grass type. Sadly, I gave in to peer pressure at school and restarted shortly after with Squirtle back then, so this is a little bit of redemption for me. Naturally, that means my rival Randy gets Charmander, the fire type, and here we are into our first battle. There's 4 options here: to attack, to switch Pokemon, use an item, or run, but running only works for wild Pokemon encounters. Again, I'm only stating this basic stuff for the 0.1% of people who have somehow found the internet and never heard of Pokemon before. Bear with me, we're going to do some cool shit shortly. After you've beaten him, you're let out into the world on your adventure. Kind of. You come to your first town outside of your own, Viridian City, and with it the first major plot point. You've got to take a parcel from the Pokemart back home to the Professor before they'll sell you any items to let you add more members to your team or buy potions for healing. So the first thing we do on our big grand epic adventure is a fetch quest. Upon delivering the parcel to the good Professor, he gives you a Pokédex, an electronic encyclopedia that he wants you to fill with data on all 150 Pokemon available in the Kanto region. He also gives one to your rival, and then, finally, for real this time, send you off on your adventure. So I just want to state here that in this playthrough, I'm not going to be completing the Pokédex and getting all 150 Pokemon, because I'm being a loner on this run through, and to get all 150 it requires a friend with the other version to trade. Fun story, when I was a kid in school, I actually got to be briefly popular because I was the only kid who owned a link cable. Needless to say, when the Pokemon fad died down, I went back to being the weird kid off in his own world. And now I'm a grown-up talking to a fucking camera. So it's back to Viridian City for a few supplies, and also our first round to join myself and plant-face the Bulbasaur, a Nidoran male that I forgot to nickname for most of the game. Eventually, we also came across our next friend, a Spearow named Beaker, and we trekked through Viridian Forest and to the first gym in our quest to become a Pokemon Master in Pewter City. So in order to challenge the Elite Four, we need 8 gym badges. To get a gym badge, you have to go to a Pokemon gym and beat the gym leader. Each gym and gym leader has their own type of Pokemon and their own motif. The first is Brock, a rock type trainer, and it's about here I got my very first slap in the face. Before taking on the gym leader himself, it's a good idea to challenge the trainers in the gym and get a good feel for what tactic you're going to use. I did this and lost. Legitimately lost against a trainer. This is a pretty weird feeling, as I've never actually lost in a Pokemon game before to a regular trainer. Elite Four, yes, but never to a regular trainer. But we have no time to dwell on that. Instead, I went to the patch of grass below the city and started to grind up my Pokemon to give them a little bit of a level advantage. Upon returning to the gym, things suddenly became an awful lot easier. Just that little bit of grinding gave me a level boost that ended up lasting the majority of the game. I managed to give myself a pretty decent advantage, and it started to take away the challenge. Later on, it managed to take away the fun. First badge obtained, my new goal was to get to the next city, Cerulean. But to get there, I have to trek through Mount Moon, and inside I'd find my first piece of the overarching plot, Team Rocket. This criminal group are attempting to raid Mount Moon for fossils, and are generally being assholes in a cave. On my way through these jumps, we had 2 Pokemon evolve, a process that changes the appearance and makes Pokemon stronger. Our roll continued through, and we got ourselves a fossil and then made it safely to Cerulean City. And right here is where I'm going to showcase the first major gripe with Generation 1, the glitches, starting with the Mew glitch. So as it turns out, there's not actually 150 Pokemon in Generation 1, there's a secret 151st Pokemon. It's referenced briefly in the late game, but Mew, one of the 2 stars of the first anime feature film, was a special Pokemon that could normally only be obtained by going to an event and having it sent to your game, or with a cheat device. This glitch, found several years later after the game's release, requires none of those. It works by glitching a long-distance trainer by teleporting away after he spots you, tricking the game's PID system, and then making the game's debug menu cough up an encounter to stop it from going haywire. This glitch can be used to spawn nearabouts anything, but at the near start of the game you can do it to spawn the rarest Pokemon of all. I'm sorry, I don't feel bad for doing this. When I was a kid, new events were really hard to come by. Best way of doing it back in Europe was mailing your cartridge to a PO box. What would then happen would be a representative would put Mew on your game for you, they would mail it back to you, and you'd have Mew. The problem was, it took about 6 weeks, so imagine a child like me, an impatient little shit, without his Pokemon for 6 weeks. But I did it, I had a legitimate Mew. Then my save battery died a couple of years ago. So now, with a new save battery installed, you're damn right, this is the only way you can get Mew anymore, and I want my friend back. It turns out that might have been the tipping point for another game flaw, but I'll dive deeper into that in a while. For now, we've got more plot to take care of, helping Bill, the tech whiz behind the PC storage systems, taking out Misty, the water-type gym leader to get our second badge, and another rocket encounter to retrieve a Dig TM, which we can use to teach our Pokemon new moves. From here, we bear on to Vermilion City for our third badge, but first we have to go aboard the SS Anne, a luxury cruise liner to retrieve a HM, a move we can use outside of battle. In this case, it's Cut, and that lets us cut down small trees. I also set up another glitch for us to enjoy later on. See, on the SS Anne, if you walk off, it triggers the animation for it to leave. However, if you intentionally lose a battle, you'll be walked back to the last Pokemon Center. Because you never walked off the boat, the animation of it leaving never happens. what does this earn us? Well, for one, we can get back on the SS Anne. But the other thing, I'll show you later. That's going to be the fucking theme for this review, I swear. HM got, tree cut, into the gym we go to take on Lieutenant Surge and his electric-type Pokemon. He's the first to have a challenge in the form of a puzzle that we must solve before we can challenge him, and it's a particularly obnoxious game of hit switch. When I eventually got it right, I took down Surge and started making my way to the next major plot point. But before then, we must backtrack through Diglett's cave to visit Professor Oak's aide and get the HM for Flash, so we can see in the upcoming Dark Rock Tunnel. Before entering the tunnel, I got another friend in the form of the electric-type Pokemon Voltorb, which we nicknamed appropriately Triangle. Thanks, Steve. And then we went off on our trek, but only before a little more grinding. That's part of the problem here. To get a balanced team that can hold its own, you have to do a fair bit of grinding against wild Pokemon. Battling against other trainers offers more experience for faster leveling up, but after you've fought that trainer just once, they're done forever. Future installments introduce various rebattling mechanics, and it's sorely needed here. Plus, it's around this point the item management issues came into play. In this game, on your person, you have exactly 20 slots in your bag to hold items, and it's far from enough. Sure, you can drop some items into the PC, but on the fly, it's useless. Again, future games fix this by adding compartments to the bag, each with their own storage limit to alleviate this issue. Plus, with newer systems, it's a lot less disorganized and makes menu navigation so much more pleasant, with less button presses for a single action. I can just see how marvelous the comments are going to be on this video. After a rather tedious cave, we enter Lavender Town, an infamous location in the series due to its association with death and decay from the Pokemon Tower, which is a massive multi-story Pokemon graveyard. But we'll deal with that later. First, I went to Celadon City, because my Pokemon were fast approaching the level cap allowed by my current badges. See, Pokemon won't listen to you if you're over a certain level and you don't have enough badges. This mechanic remains in the game to this day, and I kind of like it. It stops players from trading superly powered Pokemon early on, effectively breaking the game. This, coming from a guy with a Mew on his team. Somewhere, I get the feeling there's a pot and a kettle talking shit about me. Speaking of breaking the game, this is the point I caught myself playing the battle system against itself. To explain, the Pokemon battle system, while revolving around type advantages, such as water over fire, fire over grass, grass over water, etc., etc., also has a critical hit system. Everything past the second generation has critical hits based on a luck factor, but the rather unbalanced first generation has its critical hit ratio based on how much faster you are than the opponent, and my team had unintentionally become incredibly speedy. Voltorb, now an Electrode named Pyramid, is already one of the fastest Pokemon in Generation 1, but with Plant Face, Beaker, and to an extent Nidoking, now called And I, because King and I was landing an awful lot of critical hits, further erasing the challenge. I'll be honest, this battle system is outright broken, and because it's so broken, it makes it a lot less fun. This is about the point in the game where I started outright sweeping my opponents. 4 badges in, about halfway through, and the careless jog had become a boring crawl. Enough gyms, time for plot. In Celadon, besides Erica, the grass gym leader, there is also the Game Corner, which just so happens to be run by Team Rocket. Turns out they're up to gambling shenanigans to fund their criminal empire and their raids for fossils, running their operation out of a secret catacomb underneath the Game Corner. So it's hinted that the Game Corner is relatively new in town, and this thing is a pretty complex project. How did nobody notice the amount of digging it would take to get this underground lair in the middle of a fucking city? Did nobody look over at that construction and go, gee, this relatively simple one-floor construction is taking an awful lot of time. There's a lot of diggers over there digging up stuff. Maybe we should investigate to make sure and see if everything's on the level. This leads to the first encounter with the head honcho of Team Rocket, Giovanni, and his entire deal is... I don't think they ever actually gave him a real motive outside of Pokemon are tools to be used by Team Rocket. It's not actually explained what he's up to, what Team Rocket's ultimate goal is, or why they're doing what they're doing. they basically seem to be doing evil for the sake of evil. After you whomp him, he leaves the Silph Scope, which allows you to unmask the ghost-type Pokemon back in Lavender Town, and the actual ghost of Marowak that was murdered by Team Rocket. You'd think this would have some big emotional build-up or something, but no, it just kind of comes, and it goes. It's kind of just really an excuse to have a little more Team Rocket involvement in the plot, and I guess on a personal level, a battle in which Plant-Face evolved from Ivysaur to Venusaur. The plot goes a little breakneck from here, with you arriving in Saffron City and yet another rocket operation. This time an all-out attack on the monolithic Silph Corporation head offices. Apparently there's no such thing as police in this universe, so it's up to Cakeboy here to save the day and defeat the Rockets. Much like the Game Corner scene, you traverse around, but unlike the Game Corner, there is one very important bit of actual character development. Throughout the game, the rival character has popped up and challenged us to a battle as we both grew, and once again he appears in Silph Co to challenge you, despite the horrible scenes all around him. His narrow-minded, narcissistic mindset leads him to leaving the people in need after he loses. This is an interesting moment, and it gets brought up again at the end of the game. It stands out in the otherwise mediocre plot. It's also here that I got my 6th and final Pokemon for my main party. After I solidly whooped Randy, I was handed a Lapras by an employee. Since I'm nicknaming all my party Pokemon, I figure that I should probably get some public opinion on this one. Hey camera lady!
What?
Name the Lapras!
McBoatface!
The moral of the story is never let the general public name anything. McBoatface it is then, rounding out my team. It's time to take down Giovanni again and free Silph Co. After we soundly beat him, we're given a Master Ball, which allows us to catch any Pokemon without fail. But we only get one. It turns out Giovanni and his thugs were after this MacGuffin, again for unexplained reasons. We've just got to accept the video game logic and continue on to the Saffron Gym Leader, the Psychic-type trainer Sabrina in her teleportation maze. She was a little bit of a problem due to her typage, but I still managed to power on through after a minor hiccup. Almost immediately after, it's on to Fuchsia and the next gym, the leader being the Poison-type Master Koga, and it's a nearly identical fight. No, really, both of their teams are nearly identically leveled and they're in the same area of challenge. This feels like a cop-out, making a full quarter of the game be a rehash without increasing its difficulty. For fuck's sake, Koga's last Pokemon even self-destructed on me, so I didn't even have to do the dirty work. So if it isn't obvious, the AI in Gen 1 is pretty terrible. It'll always try and use a super effective move, even if that move causes them to commit seppuku. It's great when you're fighting someone with Psychic-type Pokemon, because 9 times out of 10, they'll eternally use Teleport, and Teleport has no effect at all in a trainer battle. This isn't holding up well. Between me breaking the critical hit system to my will and the less than stellar AI, the game started to feel more and more like a chore. The nostalgia for me had finally burned out, and so apparently had the plot. For the second half of the game, there is next to no Team Rocket. The Silph Raid was apparently their master stroke, and they fractured shortly after, leaving absolutely nothing outside of the badge collecting. I know it's an RPG and all, but when I become aware of the grind, my interest sharply declines. But onwards we push to Cinnabar Island. Here, inside the burnt-out Pokemon Mansion turned Resident Evil laboratory, is the shred of lore that hints not only at the post-game, but at the existence of Mew. I'll give it this one. There's a nice little seed of deep lore just planted inside the player's brain. Too bad it's the only time it fucking does it. It's a shame that the gym leader we get to fight here is too similarly leveled to Koga and Sabrina. Blaine, the Fire-type master, goes down just like the rest with minimal effort. He's barely a few levels above his predecessors, and honestly, the best thing about his gym are the quiz machines that let you bypass trainers en route to him. I fought them all anyway, because I am not a little bitch and nor am I an idiot. After we've gotten the Volcano badge, it's time to get our 8th and final, and all of a sudden, the plot resurfaces. I was just about to send off a missing persons report. Heading back to Viridian City will unlock the previously deadbolted gym, and inside is our final challenge, and with it the most difficult puzzle yet that I somehow completely accidentally skipped nearly entirely. No, really, I took what I thought was the route it wanted me to take and skipped over half the trainers, and it took me straight to the big bad boss Giovanni. Turns out, besides being the head honcho of Team Rocket, he's also a gym leader that nobody knows the identity of, despite his name being clearly written on the statue at the door. Conspiracy. The gyms are all tied to the Pokemon League, right? So if Team Rocket is running a Pokemon gym, does that mean that the League is in cahoots with Team Rocket? Are we turning our eye to the bigger picture here? Fuck me, this whole thing reeks of corruption. Giovanni gets walloped and then proceeds to declare that, because he got his ass kicked, Team Rocket is officially disbanding. And with that, the story turns its focus entirely on the relationship between the protagonist and the rival. Kinda. On the way to the Pokemon League, conveniently just west of Viridian City, Cakeboy bumps into Randy one last time. Randy gloats about how he's going to the Pokemon League, and how he's better and more handsome, and how he loses each time we fight, but continues to mock me! Jesus, shut the fuck up and take your beatings already! Do you know who Randy is? Randy's that one friend of yours, you know the guy. He just keeps fucking up in everything he does, but he believes personally that he has the Midas touch. Up next is one of the coolest scenes in the game, the Pokemon League checkpoint. This has never really been repeated in future games, and I kinda miss it. We pass several guards, each checking we have a badge from our journey across the Kanto region. It adds some much needed tension and build up for what's about to come in the Pokemon League, with a supreme challenge in the form of the Elite Four. However, we still have one last test ahead of us before we make our challenge. To get to the Indigo Plateau, first you have to traverse through Victory Road. There's no beating around the bush here. Victory Road sucks. The wild Pokemon encounter rate is sky high, and if you want to fill out your scene data in your Pokedex, you've got to fight every single Pokemon trainer. So you've got to do a shitload of walking around to get to them while wasting all your fucking time with these wild Pokemon. Oh, also Moltres, one of the 3 legendary birds, is also in the cave, and it's a pain to capture, but I did something naughty. See, there's an infamous glitch involving missing numbers that as a side effect will duplicate whatever item is in your 6th item slot by 128. Given how I was getting rather burned out with the whole experience by now, I did it with the Master Ball, 4 restores, max revives and rare candies, though I didn't use the latter to their full extent. So I treated Moltres as it actually is, threw a Master Ball at the bugger and gave it a very appropriate nickname courtesy of my inner childhood rage. Finally, I crawled out of Victory Road, healed up, saved, and did final preparations for the Elite Four. So around this point, I decided I was going to get all my Pokemon to level 60. My memory is fuzzy on the exact details of the league, but I remember roughly their levels being between 55 and 65 area. And I figured somewhere in the middle is a good idea. That way I'm going to have a challenge and have a little bit of fun, but I'm also going to be able to actually make a dent and stand a chance. Should be fun, right? Wrong! I swept them without blinking. Lorelei and her ice Pokemon, taken down. Bruno and his fighting types, bodied. Agatha and her ghosts, I'll be honest, they gave me momentary pause, but I still slammed them. And finally, the League King, Lance, and his Dragon-type Pokemon all ate shit like the rest. After I Doom Guide my way through, Lance crowns me a Pokemon Master, but before declaring me League Champion, the best trainer in the world, he bursts the bubble and says that someone arrived just before we did, and that he beat everyone. Now, we must dig deep and take on the final challenge, our rival, Randy. So this is a scene that gets mentioned a lot by Gen 1er types when they talk about how much better the plot was in the original games. But Mr. Rival has only really mentioned the Pokemon League on 2 occasions, once in Silph Co and once right before we go into Victory Road. You want to explain to me why he's doing this again? Is it just because he wants the title? You know, to be the very best? Like no one ever was? To catch them is his real test? To train them his cause? Whatever the case is, it's time for our final showdown! Bing, bang, bosh, down. This time, I artificially added my own challenge, switching out my Pokemon each time he did to reset the odds, but he still failed to impress me. After Randy was turned into a fine paste, Professor Oak appears to give Randy a lecture, but also to congratulate me. And here's where the Silph Co plot thread somewhat comes in. The Professor infers that because the rival did questionable things and was overall a total dick, karma bit him in the arse, with the protagonist kicking him from one end of Indigo Plateau to the other. We are then treated to the ultimate honour as a Pokemon trainer, and recorded in the Hall of Fame for all time. Or until we fuck off to Mount Silver. And that's the end. Kinda. After you've beaten the Elite Four and become champion, there's still one tiny bit of postgame. The cave by Cerulean City that was previously barred off is now completely accessible. Inside is a maze, some rather strong Pokemon, and at the end, the genetic abomination Mewtwo. Since this is the capture you're supposed to use your Master Ball on, I really don't feel bad throwing one at him and rounding out my Pokemon adventure. And with that, we're done. I don't think... Oh, sorry! How did I almost forget? I need to show you guys what glitching the SS Anne will do for you. As it turns out, since the cruise liner is on water, you can surf all around the marina. Just out of sight, on the dock to the right, there's a rather odd truck. There's no other vehicles in the game, and it's certainly an unfinished asset, so it sticks out like a sore thumb. There used to be rumours that Mew was hidden underneath it, but you can't move it at all, so that's clearly an old wives' tale. A thought just occurred to me. See, Mew was never underneath that truck, but due to our little glitch, Mew was on Nugget Bridge, which is just outside of Cerulean Cave, where Mewtwo is. In a way, it's kind of poetic, you know, the child and the parent being close together. In another way, it's pure fucking nightmare fuel. Revisiting Gen 1 gave me a little bit of new perspective on these games, and the nostalgia I had for them. It's understandable how the franchise became what it became, but these first games, in hindsight, really have not aged that well. I could go on more about how broken the battle system is, how thin the plot is, and how many bugs there are, but the final thing I'm going to focus on is yet another claim by the so-called Gen 1ers who hold these games in the highest regard: the Pokemon designs themselves. They claim them to be more animalistic and not as cartoony as future generations, making it more grounded in reality, but I'm calling bullshit. Sure, some are certainly more animalistic than they appeared in the anime series, but so many more appear with an anime or manga style. Look at Nidoking, for Christ's sakes. There's also some horrifically bad ones too, like Charmeleon, Moltres, and Wigglytuff, which looks like it belongs in a goddamn creepypasta story. Look, if you want to scratch the Kanto itch, I'm going to recommend instead of this, the Generation 3 remakes on the Game Boy Advance, or one of the many ROM hacks that fixed up these games. Hell, the remakes even added a whole new area called the Sevi Islands, which come with a full Team Rocket subplot. Plus, you know, they fixed Wigglytuff. Alright, thanks for bearing with me through this really long review, guys. We'll see you at Halloween. Take care. Nightmare fuel. Do it again.
Hey, I just met you.
And this is crazy.
But Team Rocket, they stole my baby.
That's a good. Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy. But Team Rocket genetically engineered my baby. Alright, is that good?